Hello, hello. Well, thank you so much for being here. I'm looking around the room and it's just really, I was telling Dr. Scott Kirby the other day, it's almost a surreal feeling of having everyone together, because I know you in different capacities. Jessica got me the job, thank you. So it's so great to be here with you all and celebrating 50 years, so what a milestone. We have a great program for you tonight. For those of you that don't know me, I am the program director for SPADA since January of 2019. I've been with SPADA since 2008 as a DA, which many of you in this room were also. So tonight we're going to hear from Dr. Dennis Simpson. We're going to hear from our keynote speaker, Brad Finegood. We're going to have some games. I know I went around the room for the raffle, but if you still want to get in on the football tickets, let me know and I'll put you in there. We're going to do that after our bingo trivia game, which everyone should have at their table. So with that being said, first, I'd like to introduce you to our dean, Dr. Jennifer Harrison. I have worked with Dr. Harrison for years, especially in her capacity, her previous capacity as a program director, the school director for social work. Every time I have asked Jennifer for some help, support, guidance, she's always supported our program, and most recently with the curriculum changes that just went through in fall of 2020. So I greatly appreciate that. She also has been in the field, not only as a social worker, but as an advocate and a clinician in the field of addictions. She's actually written with Dr. Mee Lee from ASAM, if you're familiar, which is really cool. So I'm proud that we have Dr. Jennifer Harrison with us tonight as our dean. So with that, please introduce Dr. Jennifer Harrison. So thank you.
So I'm so excited to welcome all of you to our amazing College of Health and Human Services, and especially to our SPADA 50th anniversary celebration. Like, that's pretty impressive, isn't it? So, like Dr. Lee said, I'm Jennifer Harrison. I'm really proud to be a social worker and a chemical addictions counselor for the last many years by training, and I'm very proud to be the interim dean of the College of Health and Human Services. In our college, we know that we offer an innovative, experiential, and inclusive education for all of our students who go on to be health and human services professionals in our own communities. So we're truly training and educating the people that will be our nurses and our addictions providers and our social workers and our occupational therapists and our rehabilitation specialists. We're proud to have the opportunity to teach and learn with the very people that will serve us for the next generations, and we take the obligation of education in culturally and linguistically responsive health and human services, and to the practice, research, teaching, and learning together toward creating more equitable systems of care and eliminating disparities in outcomes very seriously. This is why we're so pleased to have all of us with you here today to celebrate the first 50 years of the specialty program for alcohol and drug addiction, which has been educating addictions professionals in all facets of the health and human services for the first 50 years and is really just getting started. As a fellow addictions practitioner, I know that I'm preaching to the choir when I say that we recognize that addiction is a treatable, chronic medical condition. The prevention and treatment efforts for addiction services are generally as successful as for other chronic conditions, from diabetes to depression. Addiction is neither a moral failing nor simply a bad choice. People with substance use disorders often have other co-occurring chronic conditions, which makes their treatment more complex and also more necessary to ensure the health and recovery of all of us. And we also know that recovery is really all around us, and that we gotta pay attention and celebrate this like we're celebrating today, and do not only the direct work, but also the policy and the macro work that enable us to not only train addictions professionals and educate the field, but also to raise up that voice of lived experience, of recovery, and of all of the facets of addiction work, from peer support specialists and recovery coaches to physicians and social workers and licensed psychologists and counselors, and all of those. And yet we know that the stigma around addictions is different than it is for other chronic health conditions. Even Health and Human Services professionals often struggle with understanding the commonalities between substance use disorders and other illnesses. This is why our SPADA program is so vital independently, but it's also vital that it's integrated within a College of Health and Human Services so that we can be training nurses in addictions medicine and we can be training physical therapists in strong addictions work while they're pursuing their professions. All of our faculty, staff, and students have the opportunity to integrate addictions learning, research, and practice into their work in all of the fields. We have that same level of integrations with our high point of our unified clinics, best highlighted by Behavioral Health Services, and we're really pleased to have Joe Kuchenbach as our Director of Behavioral Health Services here today. I had the opportunity to practice 1 day a week for several years at Behavioral Health Services and to see the expertise of the clinicians there, many of whom are alum of our SPADA program. So we also have the opportunity, which Dr. Lee and Dr. Simpson have highlighted so well, of really being engaged in the research that's pushing forward the preeminence of what we need to do to serve people with addiction and to help them to reach health, well-being, and recovery, not only as individuals, but also in communities. Our college has been involved in workforce development, in screening, brief intervention, and referral to treatment training services, and in opioid use disorder services with many of our faculty, and are really kind of like pushing that needle forward, again, in terms of providing culturally and linguistically appropriate care and just helping people to get on their own and with folks that are walking beside them, the lives of wellness and recovery, and lives that may be different from the recovery pathway that any one of us would have chosen, but are also lives of meaningful recovery and meaningful occupations and activity. So Dr. Lee, like I said, spoke about that. I've also had the opportunity to work with colleagues at McBAP, at the Michigan Certification Board of Addictions Professionals, where I'm also a certified chemical addictions counselor, as many of you are. The WMU SPADA program is the gold standard for university addictions education within our state, not just because of our history, but because of our rigor and our integration with many other disciplines. This is something that I'm especially proud of this evening, seeing so many colleagues that are committed to enabling individuals, families, and communities to get the care that they need. I also want to take an opportunity to introduce 2 of our other faculty and administrators that are involved in the SPADA program. So Dr. Mike Miller, and I'm going to ask you to stand up, Mike. Dr. Mike Miller is our interim director of the School of Interdisciplinary Health Programs, which houses our SPADA program. And also Dr. Ann Chaplot is the interim associate dean for academic affairs, who's been deeply involved in making sure that we've got all those pathways of integration so that people can get addictions knowledge regardless of their discipline of study. Finally, I know that another reason why we're celebrating today is we have a leadership gift from a generous anonymous donor of $50,000, provided that we receive a match of that same amount from others in our community. I have my check written out today, so I'm like throwing down the gauntlet, right, and encourage you to consider giving at whatever level you can to contribute to the next amazing 50 years. So we've got Trevor Block, who's our Chief Development Officer, is happy to talk to you about giving and how you can support the SPADA program. We've also got, so I'll do it like David Mealy would say, I'm doing shameless selling right now, in addition to soul, clinical savvy, and skills, right? So this is the shameless selling portion. We've also got a QR code on the tables so that you can go to the QR code and add your contribution to exercise that match. So now I am super pleased to introduce Dr. Dennis Simpson, who has been a colleague of, I think, almost everyone here, a colleague or a teacher or a friend or a confidant to almost everyone here. So Dr. Simpson is the past program director of our SPADA program, is a past faculty senate president, has taught me so much in terms of curricular and program development, and is really a leading father in our field of addictions work in Southwest Michigan and far beyond. So really pleased to introduce Dr. Simpson. Thank you so much.
I wasn't trying to ignore our dean and being on my cell phone. It was Alan Lewandowski, who's one of our distinguished alumni members, who's trying to find this room in the building. He said he found the foyer downstairs. I am going to be talking tonight a little about a very brief history of SPADA. And the reason I think I'm here is because a former dean, Dr. Early Washington, one time referred to me as historical, and I asked what that means, and she said, that means you're old. And do I just advance this the way I think I do? The arrows go up, down, okay. I want to thank some people first. I want to thank Chris Salvaggio and Meredith Farrar, who coordinated all of this, and Tiffany could not have done without them. And I want to thank, where's Brian and Ben? Are they here? There's Ben. Where's Brian? Over there. These two gentlemen have done tremendous work today just in the setup on this. They're our doctoral associates, and they also blew up all the balloons that happened. And here's Dr. Lewandowski, who I announced. Grab a seat anywhere, Alan. We're glad to have him here. By the way, you missed it downstairs. Your picture was rotating at an earlier picture. Okay. As we're talking about the history of SPADA, I'm going to see if this works. Down? Nothing. Down. There we go. In 1972, I'm going to bring my little thing up here so I can actually see it. I actually have large print for me. In 1972, George Mallinson decided out of the blue to write a grant. He was our graduate dean for 26 years, to start the specialty program in alcohol and drug abuse. George knew nothing about alcohol and drug abuse except he had exceptional fondness for Scotch. And he wrote the grant and it got funded. And he decided, since he was the graduate dean and is also the founder of 5 different departments at Western, that he could run this along with that. After a semester, he gave up, okay? And with the first true class admitted in 1973, he hired Dr. Thomas Williams to be the director and Ms. Sharon Surratt to be the associate director. Unfortunately, Sharon has passed in these many years. Tom stayed with the program as best he could for a good long time and got it going very well. In '74, SPADA moved to this beautiful rundown house on Buckout Street. In case you didn't know, there's a place on campus called Buckout Street that has little houses that should have been torn down about 100 years ago. And I think Dr. Andrasi remembers that, don't you, Paula? Paula was a member of the Buckout Street people. And what happened there, too, Tom started getting fellowships funded. They were like doctoral associateships, but the state of Michigan did that for SPADA, and we continued that through the state of Michigan. They're back then the Department of Public Health Office of Substance Abuse Services for many years, and we're very, very gracious to Tom. In late '77, Tom got the offer of his life to be president and CEO of the Adventist Health Group of the United States, with a big bump in salary, and he took it. Then our then Dean, William Burrian, made the mistake of his life and actually recruited me from the University of Louisville, where I'd set up a program like SPADA, to come to SPADA and lead it. I have to say that Paula and others, when they first heard my deep Southern accent and my tendency to be less than appropriate sometimes, said, "Oh my God, Burrian's hired a hillbilly." Actually, I know that was said. In 1979, SPADA got its first independent grant, and admissions of the program started getting bigger as it did over time. And we started taking 25 grad students at a time. We only had a grad program there for 10 the previous year. The 10 were constrained by the 5-year grant we had from the federal government. That's all they could let us take. In '81, Greg Blevins, who had replaced Sharon Surratt as the associate director, left Western to become the chair of addiction studies at Governor State University. And Jan Decker, who was with us for many decades, joined us as our chief staff member. Greg has now retired from Governor State and is still working diligently and writing more books, I know, because I just saw a new one come out. In 1985, SPADA was awarded the contract to begin what was called the University Substance Abuse Clinics, now called the Behavioral Health Clinics at Western, expanded into mental health and substance abuse co-occurring disorders. The grant was for a great amount of $25,000, which increased dramatically. All these funds were from the Michigan Department of Corrections. In 1986, I realized that I couldn't run this clinic and run the program. And James Kendrick, who Dean Pizaniski referred to as he and I as Mutt and Jeff, because we wrote grants together. I found out Mutt was a short, not very good-looking person, but fairly bright, and Jeff was fairly tall, fairly handsome, and dumb as a door. When Jim retired, she referred to him as Jeff. So I must be Mutt. Greg came on board and started building the clinics, and he built them well over time. In '93, USAC budget grew from $25,000 a year to $3 million a year in funds. Thank you, Jim Kendrick. Thank you very much. Jim is now retired. He retired from Western in 2003. But before that, we started the undergraduate minor. There was a demand for more education at the undergraduate level, and in '98 we started that. And we started offering it through that wonderful thing, too, called distance education at Western, which the Kirbys understand, who are sitting here well, was not online. People got sent books and things, and they sent things in handwritten form. Remember that, Scott and Jessica? Those were so much fun. And that has blossomed since then. I said in 2003, Jim Kendrick retired. I lost Jeff. And in 2005, Jan Decker, who was our staff member, was promoted to the college advisor in College Health and Human Services. She has since retired. In 2006, the person who, behind her back only because she would have killed us for calling it to her in person, Nancy Kibler, who we refer to as Mighty Mouse, because of her demure height. Don't hit me, Nancy, she's here. Joined SPADA. I have to say, we were not doing well then because I've been so dependent on Jan Decker. And I found the person in Nancy Kibler to be the hardest working staff member I've ever met. And she told me, and this is not inappropriate, that you should have your whole staff members of the Christian Reformed Church. You'd get that. You told me that, Nancy. Karen Monroe joined us as our second staff member finally in 2008. Karen and Nancy were like a team who basically actually put on their annual performance review. Their most difficult responsibility was the feeding and care of Dennis Simpson. And it took up 25% of their time. Tiffany Lee joined us in 2011 as a term faculty member. Now, I have to tell you, since 1978, I had yearly been writing a letter to the Dean of the College of Health and Human Services, various deans, saying, we've got all these programs, we need a second faculty member. And I was told every year, great memo, Dennis, we don't have the money. But Dean Washington said you can hire a person as a term, and if it works out, we'll make it a tenure track. Well, term over here, Dr. Tiffany Lee, got a big grant, wrote a book, and about 18 other things. And our dean said, hey, yeah, we got to keep this lady here. So we made her tenure track. And in 2011, after I had been writing memos of justification based upon data, federal regulations, and everything, our SPADA certificate program finally was recognized for our students to have financial aid because it led to certification, which led to jobs. I never figured out why they turned us down all those years, but I was just happy they did it. Here we go. In 2014, Chris Salvaggio joined the happy crew here at Western, and she's back there. I've already thanked her. And she's been with us ever since, which really shows that she needs a mental status exam. In 2015, SPADA regional site programs, we used to have regional sites all over the place, were discontinued, and we put our graduate certificate program online as well as on campus. And we've continued that with the minor also since then. In 2018, which should have happened in 2017, except Dean Washington didn't want to make the change in her last year. Tiffany knows this. I had determined that I had about every idea I could have had, I'd put on the table, and I'm out of ideas, and I still had one functioning brain cell. And Tiffany Lee came to this university, and one of the first things I said to her is, my chair as director of SPADA is yours to lose. Go do good things. Well, she had went and done very good things over that time. And I returned to the faculty as a professor, and I found out that's a pretty neat way to be. And Tiffany became the director and told me she started sleeping less and having headaches. I could have told her that was coming. In 2021, Nancy Kibler decided she couldn't put up with this anymore, and she announced her retirement. We miss Mighty Mouse, even though you've come back as a consultant, what is it, 1 day a week? Ever since, because you miss us so much. In 2022, Meredith Farrar, who I've already congratulated, and sitting back where? Not here right now. She's working. Joined SPADA, and really we moved Chris up to Nancy's spot, and Meredith took Chris's spot with SPADA. This year, we celebrate our 50th anniversary. I never thought I'd be here that long. I came here for the great blizzard of '78 with one small plastic snow shovel, wanting to go back to the South where I came from. Since its initiation, we've had over 900 graduate certificate program alumni, over 1,000 students completing the undergraduate and minor, and that's one of the two things we're here for, is to educate people and have them come back as your great alumni are here today, as we have a speaker in that group too. I could thank all the DAs, I could thank all the alumni. It would take me the rest of the night, and I can't do that. But I love you all, and I think you know that. And over 1,000 students completing an undergraduate minor. Since its initiation, SPADA has been awarded over $35 million in external grants and contracts, funding. Our alumni, our staff, our faculty, our students are responsible for that. I had the luxury of sitting back with my feet up and watching people succeed. And that is what I will take to my grave. I want to thank you very much. And I think, I'm trying to figure out what I do now. Oh yes, I think I'm supposed to welcome Dr. Tiffany Lee, and she will explain the lack of sleep and headaches she's having these days.
All right, thank you, Dennis. I spent probably a total of 10 days on and off looking through archives, electronic archives for pictures. No one's sitting at this table, but there is a book here that we had made. There's 4 of them, so it can circulate. But I put out different announcements, pictures of Dennis 46 years ago. And so you can flip through, and then if you don't have one at your table, we can pass one to you. So I think this one is pretty cool. It's, you know, they're 1973, and they're all sitting on the ground, which I thought was kind of cool. And so tonight, I get the pleasure of doing just what Dennis said he couldn't do, which is thank everyone here. So my time here is to honor people, honor our new scholarship recipient, and everyone here in this room. So I get to celebrate people. So many of you in this room have been an inspiration. Oftentimes we don't get to hear the effects that we've had on our clients, on our students, unless they come back and tell us. And so I want to take the time to say thank you and honor you in this room. You've sparked curiosity, passion in the field, and really influenced others. And I've had the opportunity, as of Dennis, to see it happen. Victor Manzon said something to me probably 10, 12 years ago that I won't forget. So things like that where you have impacted people and you just don't hear about it. And so tonight I want to highlight some of those things, whether it's our impact on students. We have advisors in the room, and Melinda was downstairs as well, staff, our doctoral associates, and as well as our administrators. And so I can tell you that I truly believe that in a gentle way you all have impacted people and really shaken the world. So with that being said, person that we all have come to know and has impacted us is Dr. Charles Dennis Simpson. And so I want to take a moment and let him know how much we appreciate him. A man who has all made us laugh, felt his kindness and generosity. We know that Dennis cares, as much as maybe he doesn't want us to know he does. And so look at that picture, y'all, and that one up there. So Simpson to direct SPADA, 1978. I don't know if many of you also know that Dennis was the interim school director of a new school that was in 1989. And it may sound familiar to some of you in the room. It housed PA, which is actually when I started, we were under PA, gerontology. It had holistic health and healthcare administration concentration was actually in this school as well. And so Dennis led that school for a bit. And so that was 1989. Dennis has, again, brought millions of dollars during his tenure. He's brought many smiles to our faces. So thank you, Dennis, for your commitment to our students, faculty, but also as a friend and as a colleague. So if we could please honor Dennis with a round of applause. Next is our staff. So many of you may know Jan Decker. I pulled that from Facebook, so I hope she's okay with it. You know Miss Melinda Lockett, Nancy Kibler, so I know Dennis had highlighted them, and so I'm going to just acknowledge that we have wonderful staff. If we look back, we have the Outstanding Customer Service Award, which Nancy got in 2009. Karen got in 2013, and Chris got in 2017. Melinda, this year in 2023, received the WMU Academic Advising Award for the whole university, and we actually celebrated her in this room. And I know she's left, but anyone that's worked with Melinda just knows the impact that she's had on students, how much she cares, how much she brainstorms with us, and usually is like 5 steps ahead of how my brain functions. And she's just always so helpful. And so with that being said, we have people that are supportive, that care, and we're just so lucky to have them because they are the backbone. And that's why we're so glad to still have Nancy a little bit, even though she couldn't retire. We have her for a little bit longer. So thank you to our superheroes. We appreciate you beyond words. So if we could, a round of applause to our staff. And I do want to highlight Meredith just celebrated her 1 year, and Chris will be 10 years next year in October. So close. It's a blink of an eye. It's amazing. Dennis did talk about outstanding alumni that we do have. The college honors recipients of this award, many of you are in the room. We have over 100 at this point for our college, and this is on our website, but these are our folks that received it, and many of them are in the room. We have Dave Russell tonight. We have Brad Feingood, our keynote speaker, Lieutenant Colonel Dave Ariola, Alan Lewandowski. And so if you could, please stand if you are in this academy, and I would like to honor you. So as Dennis said, we tried to get accurate data to see how many alumni that we did have, and actually he and Magali, which is she's a MPH grad assistant, actually got in the dust in the files and tried to see actually how many people that we've had, because 2004 only, 2004 and above was the data that we could get. And so Dennis tried to get an accurate number. So we can accurately say, at least from 2004, that we've had that many undergraduate minors and almost 700 graduate certificate recipients. And so what an honor. I do want to ask that if you are an alumni of our program, if you could please stand and be honored as well. Oh, Paula. And you may have to stand a couple times because I know some of you are not only alumni, but also teach for us, et cetera. We, as Dennis said, could not do without our grad assistants. It's me and him, and we have curriculum that constantly has to be updated. I'm constantly reaching out to you, and we're asking for things, and we just really appreciate our grad assistants because often they do faculty jobs to help support us. And so it's an honor to have you with us, and I know several in the room have been and currently are. So if you could, if you are or have been a grad assistant, can you please rise? Thank you. And like I say, I owe Jessica a bit of gratitude. I almost said, oh no, I just want to teach for the program. And Jessica goes, no, come on, you should do this. And I look back and I'm like, if I wouldn't have, my trajectory in life would have been different. I have a 7-year-old now, as you guys know, and I just wonder what would have happened if I would have not taken that position. So thank you for that. So also, our faculty, again, we have numerous faculty, not only in this room, but elsewhere that teach not only 1 classes, but 2, or I'm hitting somebody up like Brad, like, oh, you know, we have this class available in 2 weeks, can you go do this? And everyone is always so eager to help, and again, we truly appreciate everything that you do for us, and your flexibility, your engagement with students, and just your level of care and support over the years for me, Dennis, the students, the staff. And so if you are an instructor for us or have taught, can you please rise? And I did want to point out too, with Joe being the clinic director, we appreciate everything that you do over there. And they also, our students and our practicum students do go to BHS. And so thank you for all you do too, Joe. Okay. So we were notified earlier this year that we received a gift and honor of Jimmy Patent. So I'm going to just say a little bit about him and then recognize our recipient, Kate Besa. So Jimmy Patent, Carol, his wife, wrote me a letter and told me a little bit about him. So he volunteered to work on campus crisis lines while at WMU. He was a graduate of the counseling program. And got his master's degree. He became a clinical director at the clinic in Farmington, Michigan. During the next 20 years, he had a variety of jobs ranging from therapist to department director at a local hospital. He and a colleague actually wrote the first substance abuse program at Mesa Community College in Arizona. His last job was CEO of Keystone, which is a co-occurring hospital in Pennsylvania. And he received many awards. And so I asked for more information. Carol said this about him, and I want to highlight. She said, and quote, "The time he spent at WMU was among the highlights of his life. He loved everything about college life, which is why WMU is the perfect place to honor his memory. Even after his passing, his legacy of compassion and service can remain intact. So we are proud to announce that the first Patent Scholarship recipient is Kat Besa, and I want to tell you a little bit about her. She is a clinical mental health counseling student, similar to Jimmy, and she is also in our program the clinical addiction certificate, which actually started in fall of 22. She is the intern at Wicks Therapy in Kalamazoo. She actually grew up in Kalamazoo. She's a Kalamazoo Promise recipient. A little bit more about Kat and her commitment to others. I was talking to her tonight. She's an independent tutor for students in the Kalamazoo area, and they range from 8 to 14 years old. And she prioritizes holding tutoring sessions on Western's campus, and she does it in Sangren Hall. And so she'll have the students come, and she'll tutor them on campus, which I thought was really cool. She's worked in God's Kitchen. She has worked for Habitat for Humanity. She says that she tries to give back to the community that has supported her. As a Kalamazoo Promise student who grew up with many adversities, she says, I can't thank my community for seeing a young girl and gifting her a new trajectory. I'm so blessed to be the first individual in both my maternal and paternal side to hold a master's degree, and she's hopeful to obtain a PhD one day. Thank you once again for the opportunity and assistance. I'm incredibly honored to have the opportunity to be the first recipient of the Patton Scholarship. So with that, please join me in congratulating Kat with this honor from the Patton family. Kat, please come up and get your certificate. And we actually have streaming. I don't know if I've told everybody, we are on YouTube right now. Hi, Nate. Hi, Miss Patton. I think Carol is streaming in with others that couldn't be with us today. And so we are on YouTube. We're live. So thank you and congratulations, Kat. We're proud. So with that, I know Dean Harrison had talked about gifting. I just want to say thank you to our donors. I know many of you in the room have already gifted. We have that anonymous $50,000 match up to. We've had, obviously, the Patton Scholarship, which we're so honored, and we have another one from the Hickmott family. And so with that being said, I just want to say thank you. Also, before I forget, again, big shout out to the Planning Committee and Meredith and Chris. They helped make all of this swag with the cricket and everything and helped put all this together. So I want to say thank you. If you are on the Planning Committee, can you please stand so we can give you a round of applause as well? Thank you. Thank you. And I know Anta was already standing, so thank you. I couldn't have done it without you. I am not a planner. Oh, I'm a planner, but not this kind of planning. No. What makes me anxious, Chris, I'd be like, Chris will say, well, what about this or this? I'm like, I don't know. Just, it'll be wonderful, I know. So thank you. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce you to our keynote speaker, Mr. Brad Finegood. So a little bit about Brad. Brad had his master's in counseling from WMU, and he's a SPADA grad assistant early 2000s. And, it's been a minute. Now he's a strategic advisor for public health for King County and Seattle, and recently served as co-chair for the King County Heroin and Prescription Opiate Task Force. Brad has worked in the field for 25 years. He's taught for probably at least half that. Always willing to help out with curriculum. And Brad sends me podcasts like a couple weeks ago and was like, hey, I was listening to this, and just always willing to help and help within a short time frame. We appreciate Brad. He's hands down one of the leading advocates for reducing stigma for substance use disorders. He is a big advocate for harm reduction strategies. And so obviously he's won some awards and well-deserved. So one of the most recent in 2022, he was King County Council gave Brad the Recovery Champion Award. Another huge recognition. I did some stalking. 2017, I found that he was the most influential person of the year for Seattle, kind of a big deal. I know that often, again, we don't know how much people have influenced us, how many times we've been impactful. And I know Brad has impacted me. He's impacted people in this room. We were talking about Brad the other night. And, you know, I always heard of Brad or talked to him or emailed. And then a couple years ago, I was able to go to a conference in Seattle, and we met in Pike's Place, had lunch, and talked. And it was the first time I really got to know Brad, and I thought, wow, he's a huge advocate, family man, humble, down to earth for somebody that does TED Talks. And so, you know, I just want to say with that, we're super stoked that you're here, and I admire the heck out of you. So please welcome our colleague, our friend, King County's Superman, Brad Finegood.
Wow. I don't think of myself that way. But thank you. Thanks, Tiffany. That was super nice of you. I was like, how did I get chosen to keynote this amazing event? And then as Tiffany was asking people to stand up, I'm like, I'm 4 for 4. I'm like, I've been here for a while. That's me. So anyway, welcome everybody. I guess I don't need to welcome people. You all been welcomed a bunch. So a little standard disclaimer for most talks I do. I'm a big crier. And when I say I'm a big crier, I mean, I've given 2 TED Talks. I've spoke publicly probably hundreds of times, and it's rare that I don't cry. And considering I've been bawling, like on the plane last night, writing this speech, I'm gonna guarantee, I was like, I'm gonna guarantee that I'm gonna cry. I started crying like an hour and a half ago when I saw the Kirby's. So, everything that the SPADA program has given to me is more than I can ever begin to tell you in these next 15 minutes, now 14 minutes, or it's probably like half an hour. My SPADA journey started before I even knew what SPADA was, about 25 years ago. I used to be like, I know, you guys don't even think I'm 25. Looking at some of these pictures. I'm showing my age. I was working in Charlotte, Michigan, right outside of Lansing, in one of the first felony drunk driving courts in the country. I was talking with one of my colleagues, and I kept saying, you know, I got my bachelor's degree from Michigan State, but the one thing that I knew is my grade point was awful. And if I was ever gonna need to do anything, I needed to get my grade point up before I could go into a master's program. So my buddy, Sean Corbin, he was taking classes at the Western campus in Lansing in the Masters of Public Administration program, and he's like, why don't you check this out? And I was like, okay, but I do not want to go into public administration. Fast forward, that's all I do with my days now. So I looked at the offerings and I saw I could apply to enroll in this SPADA program as a non-matriculating student. I wish Google was around then because I had no idea what a non-matriculating student was. But I became one. I applied, got in. My first class I took was with Jim Kendrick. It was one of those marathon weekend classes, like once a month. The first time I walked in, I seriously had to do a double take. I was like, this is amazing. Jerry Garcia is here teaching at Western Michigan University in Lansing. I thought he was dead. But I'll never forget that first class. I was mesmerized at the intellectual stimulation and learning about a topic that I had just professionally started to dip my toe in. At that point, in addition to working with the DUI program, I had worked as an adolescent counselor and at a methadone clinic. But I couldn't get enough. On breaks, I kept going up to Jim, engaging with him, talking about all the things that fascinated me about the addiction field. Understanding about the etiologies of drug use, theories of change, understanding about our treatment system. I loved everything that SPADA gave me, up until I got to Dennis's pharmacology class. And I was like, I'm not smart enough for this. One day after class, Jim came up to me and he's like, Brad, he's like, settle down. No, I'm just kidding, he didn't say that. He said, you really seem interested in this field. You ever think about going back, getting your master's degree? You could work for SPADA as a graduate assistant, come work in the prisons, because at the time, and I don't know if it's still the case, but Western had the contract with Department of Corrections to go run groups in prison. And from that moment on, I felt like I became part of a family and a community that means more to me today than I could have ever imagined. I went back home that day after Jim asked me about it, asked me if it was possible, talked to me about what was possible. I ran it by my wife. At the time, we had a 1-year-old living in Lansing, and off we went to Kalamazoo. I learned so much throughout my career and time at Western. Some of those learnings, most of those learnings were intentional learnings, but it was occasionally that I learned some things that was a little bit more happenstance. I was reminiscent earlier about the doctoral thesis and research project that Chris Clatterbuck ran. That was my first experience, and I was like, anyway, I'll just leave it at that. Or when I used to lecture at undergrads in Sanger Hall, to undergrads in the Intro to Addiction class, I would always start off the class talking about the mutual learning experience that we would have in that class. And I always started class by asking people what they could teach me. And people would raise their hand and they're like, alcohol is bad, drugs are bad. And then I'll never forget one undergrad who raised his hand and told me about things like alcohol enemas, so people's breath wouldn't smell. Thinking about the lengths that people go to use substances. I remember the first time I walked into a prison working for USAC, the University Substance Abuse Clinic. I learned about the impact of drug policies and the war on drugs to communities of color. I'll never forget walking in the room filled with dozens of men of color, usually black men, looking at me like I had no clue. Because the truth of the matter is, I had no clue. Because there had never been one day in my life that I had walked in their shoes. I had never known the intergenerational traumas that these gentlemen had been through, all incarcerated for substance-related charges, taken out of their homes and taken out of their communities. How many years have you been incarcerated? I asked one day. There were about 12 gentlemen in the room, all elder statesmen. They had been incarcerated for over 100 years. And so together, the 12 people have been incarcerated for over 100 years. And how many children and grandchildren do you have? Collectively, there are 150 children and grandchildren that did not have their male role models there for them to come home. As a field, and I know personally, we have been complicit at times in causing trauma, sometimes mostly unintentionally, asking the criminal legal system to back us up when people were not complying. We know the more adverse childhood experiences, the greater the likelihood a person will develop a substance use disorder or have some other bad outcome. The stark difference for me that day was I was the only person going home at the end of the day. I was going home as the only white person in that room to give my newborn a kiss and read a book, while these community members slept in cages because of a failed war on drugs. The racial disparities and disproportional impacts continue to manifest themselves throughout our systems of care. Whether it's carceral systems or other negative health outcomes like overdoses, people of color are suffering impacts of substance use at much worse pace than white individuals. The data on the screen is from where I work in public health, Seattle, King County, where we see American Indian Alaska Natives suffering a 9 times higher overdose rate than white people. Black individuals at approximately a 3 times higher rate of overdose than white people. The racial disparities continue to manifest themselves. A year or two later, I was in the middle of my counseling and SPADA field placement. I was doing my field placement at Ellie's Place in Lansing, counseling young, beautiful humans with broken hearts. Ellie's Place is a place for grieving children, all who had lost a loved one, there to process through their grief. I remember their pain and heartache was so deep. The surrealness of their loved ones that were there one day and gone the next. I tried to show my deepest empathy and be present for them, as I learned in my counseling theories class. But I just remember thinking, I can't relate to these kids' loss. I didn't know that feeling of deep, deep grief. A couple months into my internship was the holiday break. It was so nice to spend that time with my family, off from school, off from work. In addition to finishing grad school, my family was starting to take off. We had a second child now, with a 3-year-old and a newborn. New Year's Day, 2004, 2005. My dad called. "Are you sitting down?" he asked. "Yup, I was already sitting down." "Of course, Dad, what's up?" "Your brother passed away." My brother, Greg, with 2 G's, was my best friend. He was half of my soul, and he died January 1st, 2004, 2005, of acute intoxication from multiple drugs. My brother had overdosed and died. In the days that follow, I learned so much more about substance use disorder than I could ever learn from a textbook. I learned about the power of shame, and I learned about the power of stigma. I learned about the impacts of substance use on families. I learned about all the unintended consequences that no one intends when they're using drugs. For years to follow, I often said, only if my brother would have been arrested, only if he would have had those hard interventions. But as I've learned, when people get arrested, that only exacerbates the problem. Incarceration exponentially increases people's overdose risk. The truth is if the person with him that day would have recognized the signs of what an overdose looked like and they had naloxone with them, my brother would not have died that day. And then I learned something else that I would never learn without being part of this family, the SPADA family. A few days later was my brother's funeral. We woke up to a horrible snowstorm in the Metro Detroit area. As we made our way to the funeral home, it was a pure whiteout. We walked into the family area shortly after getting situated, and about a half hour before the ceremony, the attendant came and asked if we were ready for guests. I told you I was a crier. As they pulled back the curtain, the first person there was Dennis. He waited through hours of snow that day to make sure he was the first person there to give me a hug. Okay, I need to take a levity break for a second. So when I saw this picture for the first time in probably a decade and a half, I thought about a couple things. Like that fallacy that I had, that I wasn't getting older, that blew that out of the water. And the second thing I thought was, is Dennis really my dad? No, I'm just kidding, because my mom promises me that she didn't meet Dennis until I was in my 20s. I'm just joking. My dad's here today. The author Johann Hari says the opposite of addiction is not recovery. The opposite of addiction is connection. And there's no other truth of that importance for me than this connection I have to the amazing folks in this program over the last 20 years. Jim Kendrick, Dennis, Tiffany, along with all the amazing folks that I've spent time with, Chris Clatterbuck, Taylor, who I learned it's your fault that I'm doing this, Linda Quo, Jan Decker, of course, the Kirbys, and one of my lifelong best friends from the CCP program, Jim Owens. Every day, this has been a family to me. A colleague of mine, Dr. Susan Collins, the other night said that we have to change the way we are doing work in this field. We can't operate like we used to operate. The stakes are too high. Too many people are dying. For too many years, I was complicit as a counselor of being an abstinence-based counselor, hardline. If you're not abstinent, I was going to kick you out of treatment. I would report that to somebody's probation officer to provide backup, maybe even send somebody to prison for their own good. I can now acknowledge the harms that I've caused. Today, if I was to kick someone out of treatment, as Dr. Collins said the other night, I might not ever see them again. As we go into the 4th wave or the 10th wave or whatever it is of this opioid and overdose epidemic, we must realize we have to engage with folks on the terms that work for them, not for us. My good friend and colleague, Dr. Caleb Banta-Green at the University of Washington, is the author of the Washington State Syringe Exchange Program. What this data shows on the screen is that folks who do not engage in treatment, who we have traditionally referred to as treatment resistant, actually do want treatment. They want help. But it's the type of treatment that we're offering, or that treatment that's out of reach for people. That bar we set is often too high. And unfortunately, we cannot afford to set the bar that high, because when we really understand that addiction, we understand that it actually makes sense for someone with opiate use disorder to scrounge up $1 to buy one fentanyl pill. Because at that time, that one pill has so much more utility for them than I ever could. Things have changed so much since I started in this program more than 20 years ago. The drug supply is so much cheaper and addictive. Even experimental early drug use is so much more lethal because more people can ingest highly lethal drugs without a needle. The stakes are higher, and that makes our jobs and how we do it that much more important. In Seattle, where I live, the number of people dying has tripled in the last 7 years, driven by a highly adapted synthetic drug supply. I swear, illicit drug manufacturers had access to ChatGPT long before I had it. They're so much smarter than we are. I asked ChatGPT, what's the next drug trend? ChatGPT was mad at me. It said, I can't tell you, go get some help. But one thing that hasn't changed in the last 20 years is that the most important thing I have learned from the SPADA program is the importance of connection. Graduating from this program shortly after my brother passed was one of the most meaningful days of my life. I've been honored to be part of this program for the second half of these 50 years. I, like so many of us, won't be here for the 100th anniversary. Although if you tell me that Dennis will be here for the 100th anniversary, I'll totally believe you. As we move forward into this next 50 years, it's our responsibility to continue to build on the center of excellence that has been built by Dennis and Tiffany and so many others, so that the next generation of counselors, therapists, and social workers will be able to address the overdose crisis, work with folks with substance use disorder by developing the same sense of deep connection to the work that I have over the past 25 years. Thank you all.
Thank you, Brad. All right. And I'm being cognizant of time. Where are we at, Dennis? We are at 7:30. Okay. So now we turn a little bit to have a trivia bingo game, and it's connected. So what we'll do is I brought my Stein that I got a couple of weeks ago from the antique store, 1930s. So I said this will be perfect to put trivia in and pull out. So what we'll do is I'll ask a question. You all have your trivia in front of you, your little bingo cards. If you think that you know the answer, raise your hand and and the DAs and I will try to figure out who raised their hand first. And you can come up and get a piece of swag. We have cups, we have, just a whole bunch of stuff up here. The 6 that are on the left there are for those that win trivia, or win bingo. So when you have a bingo, say bingo, and then you can come up, and it also comes with an Amazon gift card. All right, any questions? All right, let's get started. Ooh, that's a long one. We'll go with this one first. All right, question 1. SPADA had a graduate fellow who then became the associate director of SPADA. This person coordinated the development of credentialing criteria used to establish the certification standards for addiction counseling. Who was this? Jessica. Oh, sure. Oh. Well, thank you that you think it would be me. Unfortunately, it's not. Oh, yes. Oh, good guess. Around that same era. I'll say he was a graduate fellow who was the associate director of SPADA. Yes, we had one of those at one point. Greg Blevins, who said it? All right, Dave, you can come and get some swag if you want to, all the way from the back row. Ooh, next, make sure that you, X that one out. All right, next one. Which SPADA faculty member, who also served as the first dean of CHHS, developed the strategic management model called Service Management by Objects that was then taught statewide to local addiction treatment programs? Whew. SPADA faculty member who served as the first dean of CHHS. I think Dennis may have mentioned that person in his speech. Do you know what it is? Okay, Dennis, go ahead. Yes, sure. All right, Bill Burrian is the correct answer. Next question. You can come get some swag too, Dennis. Okay. You can have a coffee cup. What is the name of the new 9-credit-hour SPADA graduate certificate that started in 2022? 9